We decided to dress up a little bit when we went to the courthouse together. It was going to be the fastest wedding ever, but I still wanted it to be memorable. Josh looked so handsome in his black tuxedo. I was filled with so much happiness and sadness at the same time. I loved him so much, but this wasn't how I expected my wedding day to be at all. Just as we were about to say our vows to each other, someone came crashing in through the doors.
You two left for this? Do you know how much work you're missing right now? Neither of you have cleaned my car yet.
It's Saturday. We're not even supposed to be working today in the first place, much less cleaning your car.
It's just becoming clear to me how little the two of you care about your careers.
It was at this moment that I snapped. I had sacrificed so much for this woman for so many years, thinking that it would be better for my career in the long run. It finally dawned on me that she was never going to help my career anyways. She was just using people as her little slaves to do what she wanted them to do, and had no intention of ever helping them get anywhere. Ever since I was a little girl, I've always loved clothes. I would spend lots of late nights flipping through a fashion magazine and fantasizing about what it would look like to have my own designs in there one day. I liked styling outfits together and making other people feel good about what they wore. So it made sense for me to study fashion design once I graduated high school. In college, I was a promising student. People would always tell me how amazing my designs were. I became so hopeful about my future and finally living my dream. Once I graduated, I had my pick of working at whatever fashion magazine I wanted, and I chose the magazine that I had loved as a child. Instead of it feeling like a dream come true to finally work at my dream job, it was a nightmare. Growing up, the founder of the magazine had been such an inspiration to me. She created the magazine herself and had been running it for the past 30 years. She turned the magazine into one of the most popular ones in the country. I had dreamed about becoming just like her when I was a little girl. They say never meet your heroes for a reason, I guess. Joan, my boss, had such impossible standards for everyone, and nothing anyone did was ever good enough for her. She kept saying that her work ethic was how she got to where she was today. She would have all the designers submit 400 sketches to her by the end of the day, every day. Half of the time, she never liked any of the submissions, anyways, and would make them redo all of them. Everyone would have to stay late to meet her insane request deadlines, with no overtime pay. People missed a lot of important events outside of work, but we were too afraid to tell her that her expectations for the magazine were too high. We were too afraid of losing our jobs. If you wanted to make a name for yourself in the fashion world, you needed to stay on Joan's good side. She was very quick to fire anyone who dared to stand up to her. But it wasn't just the work for the magazine. She would have us do work that was clearly not for the magazine at all. She would call us all into work to do things for her like washing her car, doing her laundry, and even picking up her kids from school. It was like we were her slaves. One day, I overheard someone try to talk to her about it.
Joan, I can't be coming in this weekend to clean your house. I'm a fashion designer, and I came here to design clothes. Working as your maid isn't part of my job description.
As long as you work here and want to make a name for yourself in this industry, you're going to do what I tell you to do. But since you don't like it, I won't make you do it. You're fired. Get out.
As much as we all hated her, she was a powerful person in the industry, and if we wanted to get anywhere with our careers, we had to do what she said. It was especially hard because she wouldn't let us have lives outside of work, at all.
Ms. Joan, my son's first birthday is coming up, and I was hoping that I might be able to have a day off this weekend to spend it with him. I've been having so many late nights in the office lately that I haven't been able to spend any time with him in months.
You want a day off this weekend?
Yes, please. That would be so wonderful.
Of course you can have it off. In fact, you can have the whole weekend off.
Oh my goodness, really?
Weekends are for lazy good-for-nothings, and if you're not serious about your career here, then neither am I. You're fired. Get out!
I was so scared of her for so long that I put so much of my personal life on hold for years. I didn't date. I didn't travel. I didn't do anything except work. Despite her being a terrible boss, I wanted to impress her so that I would have the confidence to finally create my own fashion company. After years, I started bonding with my coworker Josh, who worked late nights with me. We mostly talked about how terrible our boss was. We slowly got to know each other more as we spent more time together, and I began to fall in love with him. He made being there a little less terrible by telling me little jokes and encouraging me in my designs. We started dating and eventually decided to get married. The problem was the very thing that brought us together in the first place. When on earth would we have time to get married? Joan never approved time off requests, and if she ever heard about them, she would immediately fire whoever requested the time off. We talked about it together and eventually decided to risk it. We were in love with each other and wanted to get married, so we'd deal with whatever consequences that followed. We didn't dare request a whole day off, or even bother to plan an extravagant wedding out of fear of losing our jobs. Instead, we sneaked to Bethany in HR and asked for a couple of hours off so that we could stop by a courthouse to say our vows to each other and sign some paperwork. It wasn't glamorous or what I imagined my dream wedding to be, but I thought that was the only thing that would be quick enough so that Joan wouldn't fire us. Bethany readily agreed and submitted the paperwork. We decided to dress up a little bit when we went to the courthouse together. It was going to be the fastest wedding ever, but I still wanted it to be memorable. Josh looked so handsome in his black tuxedo. I was filled with so much happiness and sadness at the same time. I loved him so much, but this wasn't how I expected my wedding day to be at all. Just as we were about to say our vows to each other, someone came crashing in through the doors.
You two left for this? Do you know how much work you're missing right now? Neither of you have cleaned my car yet.
It's Saturday. We're not even supposed to be working today in the first place, much less cleaning your car.
It's just becoming clear to me how little the two of you care about your careers.
It was at this moment that I snapped. I had sacrificed so much for this woman for so many years, thinking that it would be better for my career in the long run. It finally dawned on me that she was never going to help my career anyways. She was just using people as her little slaves to do what she wanted them to do, and had no intention of ever helping them get anywhere. I stood there for a moment, thinking about all of the times that I had let her bully about how I led my life because I was so afraid of getting on her bad side. Heck, I almost sacrificed having the wedding of my dreams just because I was so afraid that she would fire me. I had had enough. You know what? You're right. I've worked for you for 5 years, have never taken a sick day or a vacation day, or even had a life outside of work because I'm not serious about my career. I've been terrified of you, but you don't scare me anymore. I quit.
Me too. Now we have time to have a real wedding instead of a rushed one in the courthouse.
Neither of you can quit because you're both fired. I'll make sure you don't get a job anywhere ever again.
Josh and I had enough money saved up to have the wedding of our dreams, like we had always wanted. We had a destination wedding in a beautiful foreign country, with all of our families there. We invited all of our co-workers, and after hearing what had happened, all of them quit working for Joan. They were inspired by us for having stood up to her, and decided to stand up to her themselves. A lot of them took to social media to tell the world how terrible she was as a boss. Their videos went viral, and no one wanted to work for her anymore. After our beautiful honeymoon together, we decided that in order to have the fashion designing career we had always wanted for ourselves, we would need to create our own magazine company. We told all of our coworkers, and they all readily agreed to come work for us. All of us worked hard as a team, and with all of our experience working under Joan for so long, we had an amazing magazine that quickly became more popular than Joan's magazine ever was. I was so happy that I was finally working for myself, like I had always wanted, and had the loving husband of my dreams. This was the life I had always wanted for myself. I was just mad that it took me this long to finally stand up for myself and get it. Our magazine company expanded so quickly that we became global fashion icons. We didn't let the success get to our heads, though. Josh and I had very strict employee standards, and made sure that we never treated any of our coworkers like Joan had treated us.
Did you hear?
Did I hear what?
Joan's magazine company flopped. No one wants to work with her because they heard how terrible she was to her employees. She had to declare bankruptcy.
Oh my gosh, really? What is she doing now then?
No one knows. She just disappeared.
I soon found out where she went. Thanks to the success of our magazine, Josh and I were able to hire maids from a cleaning company. They sent different maids to our home every weekend to clean up, do our laundry, and wash our car. One weekend, I recognized one of the maids that was cleaning our house. It was Joan. When she saw me, she busted into tears and got on her knees.
This is so embarrassing. This maid company is the only place that will hire me after everything that happened with my previous company. Will you please hire me? You know how good I am at my job, and it's such a waste of my talents for me to be scrubbing toilets for the rest of my life. I'm so much better than this. You wouldn't have gotten where you are today without me. This is the least you could do to return the favor of me helping you with your career.
You never helped me with anything in my career. Everything I have today is because I worked my butt off for it. All you did was hold me back and make me do your chores. I would never ever hire you to work for me. After she left my house, I called the maid company and told them that I didn't want her to ever clean my house again. They asked me what happened. I simply told them how bad she smelled and that she didn't do the job properly. A few months later, I heard she was fired from her job and is currently in search of any job to survive. Karma is a funny thing. She spent so much of her life making people do her house chores, promising them a boost in their career that she never gave. Now she's spending the rest of her life as a has-been CEO and a maid, cleaning up for other people. Thanks for watching. Make sure to subscribe and leave a comment down below saying I subscribed, and we will try our best to reply to your comment. I don't have any interest in law. I want to be a chef and a model. I know this is going to be disappointing to you both, but I'd appreciate it if you accept my choice. I've never asked you both for anything, so I'm asking now. Please, let me go to a cooking academy and also begin modeling training. When my parents remained quiet, I'd thought they were thinking about it. Well, until my mom stood up and landed a stinging slap on my cheek.
Modeling? A chef? Are you insane? I let go of my dream for you. I wanted to be a lawyer, but you stole that from me. Your existence made my family disappointed in me. I do not care about you, young lady. All I care about is you achieving that dream you stole from me.
Your mom had to forfeit her dream, all for you. She had to take care of a child she didn't ask for. Now, she requests just one thing from you, and you're refusing. You're so ungrateful. If you don't want to be a lawyer, you living this house.
I'd never been more confused. I stole her dream. I didn't ask to be born. She decided to have me. How had I stolen her dream? Hi, I'm Samantha. I'm the firstborn child of my parents. When they had me, my dad had just lost his job, and my mom was still in her final year as a law student in college. My dad's parents were wealthy lawyers. They had their own law firm, but they'd wanted him to work somewhere else before coming into their firm. After my mom announced her pregnancy, he'd fallen into a confused state, leading to him making continuous mistakes at work. Eventually, he was fired. He was forced to go to my grandparents for help. Both sides were disappointed to hear that my parents were expecting a child out of wedlock. My dad's parents wanted him to be a great lawyer like them, and my mom's parents wanted the same for my mom. However, with the pregnancy and my dad losing his job, it seemed nearly impossible. Eventually, they softened up and decided to help the couple. I was born 4 months after they got married. My mom was angry about everything. She transferred the aggression to me. After my birth, she refused to touch me. My grandparents were forced to step in to care for me. She also refused to breastfeed me, no matter how much everyone pressured her. I grew up with my nanny and saw her more as a parent than my own parents. As for my parents, they went back to their lives. My dad began working at his dad's firm, while my mom worked at her aunt's restaurant. She'd given up on going to college, as well as her dream of being a lawyer like her parents. My parents started forcing me at a young age to read law books. When I didn't show interest, they hated me more. When I got to age 14, my mom got pregnant again. For the first time in a long time, my parents began spending time at home. Well, they both acted like I didn't exist, as we weren't close at all. I would see them rubbing my mom's tummy and smiling, and I'd walk away. I wasn't needed. It was obvious. My sister's birth was celebrated like the biggest achievement ever. Even though no one spoke to me, I was happy. I was excited about having a sibling to share my love with, since I had no one to give it to. Unfortunately, they refused to allow me to touch her because they believed I brought bad luck to people. That's how the favoritism started. I wasn't allowed to play with my sister because, apparently, I was bad luck and ugly. I would often watch from afar, admiring her. According to my parents, I was bad luck because my mom dropped out of school when she was pregnant with me, And my dad lost his job at the same time, disappointing their parents. As my sister grew up, she noticed the tension and also inherited the hatred. At age 5, she would hit my hand away if I tried to touch her.
My mom says you're bad luck. Stay away from me.
But I'm not. I'm your sister, and I love you. She refused to listen to me. My mom had made her believe in the hatred she had for me. There was no way I could convince her otherwise. I let it be and focused on my studies. Well, by the time I was almost done with high school, I finally had a dream. And the dream wasn't to be a lawyer, like they wanted. I wanted to be a model and a chef. Mom, Dad, I don't want to go to law school.
Huh?
I don't have any interest in law. I want to be a chef and a model. I know this is going to be disappointing to you both, but I'd appreciate it if you accept my choice. I've never asked you both for anything, so I'm asking now. Please, let me go to a cooking academy and also begin modeling training. When my parents remained quiet, I'd thought they were thinking about it. Well, until my mom stood up and landed a stinging slap on my cheek.
Modeling? A chef? Are you insane? I let go of my dream for you. I wanted to be a lawyer, but you stole that from me. Your existence made my family disappointed in me. I do not care about you, young lady. All I care about is you achieving that dream you stole from me.
Your mom had to forfeit her dream, all for you. She had to take care of a child she didn't ask for. Now, she requests just one thing from you, and you're refusing. You're so ungrateful. If you don't want to be a lawyer, you living this house.
I'd never been more confused. I stole her dream. I didn't ask to be born. She decided to have me. How had I stolen her dream? I went to bed that night in tears. From then, life became tough for me. Whenever my mom came across me, she would yell thief at me and simply walk away. As for my sister, she took sides with my mom.
I've been told you're evil, but I can't believe you're this evil. You know she couldn't be a lawyer because of you. What is it gonna take to be a lawyer for her? You're so selfish.
I didn't ask to be born. She had me because she wanted to. I have no interest in becoming a lawyer like everyone. How's that hard for you all to understand?
You're just giving excuses for your selfishness. She gave birth to you even though she didn't want to. You owe her that much even if you're not interested. Why don't you become a lawyer then? Be the lawyer she wants. Well, guess what? I'm only 7. I'm too young to think about that. And I didn't steal Mom's dream.
I was hurt that she refused to see things from my perspective. I mean, she was only 7. I hadn't expected her to understand or support me, but I still felt hurt. Time passed, and no one brought up the topic anymore. Until my 18th birthday, when I was finally done with high school. My parents began searching for the best law school. I overheard my mom talking to my dad one night. According to her, she had a dream institution back then, and would have loved me to go there if better ones hadn't been established. I was irritated and even angrier. She was trying so desperately to make me achieve things she couldn't, while still blaming me for being the cause. I decided to visit my grandparents. I went to my dad's parents first and brought it up in front of them. I was disappointed to see that they shared the same dream with my mother.
Well, we're all lawyers. Your mom would have been a lawyer too if you hadn't come in. You have no choice, child.
As for my mom's parents, it was worse because I wasn't as close to them as my sister was. When I told them about not wanting to study law, they called me names and sent me out of their house. Before I got home, both parties had called my parents to tell them about my visit. I reached home to see my parents and sister waiting outside the gate.
Before we allow you back in here, you have to make a decision. Be a lawyer or leave.
I was confused and dumbfounded. Well, until they chased me out of their lives for good. I was forced to leave. I went to my extended families. None of them accepted to help me. I began wandering in the streets, begging for food to eat and checking nonstop for menial jobs to do. Well, luckily, an agency who were scouting for models found me on the streets and were impressed by how I looked. They took me with them and transformed my entire life. They trained me for modeling. It didn't take long to master it, as I'd begun to practice on my own earlier. On the first day, I walked at a brand's show. The news spread like wildfire. Everyone wanted to know who I was. My agency seized the opportunity to put me out there for people to see more. I walked in more shows and gathered more popularity. By the end of the year, I'd signed deals with different brands, majorly the big ones. I was able to get myself a comfortable apartment while saving up for the cooking academy. The next year, I'd made more than enough money, so I quickly paid for the cooking academy and also got a car for myself. Life was going well for me. I began attending classes at the academy while also still modeling. I graduated as the best student and got a fully equipped restaurant. I couldn't believe my luck. At age 20, I'd achieved so much, and I was happy with it. I quickly employed workers at the restaurant, and we began business. It didn't take long before people became aware that the restaurant was owned by their favorite model. Once they knew, we began dealing with too many customers. The next year, I was forced to open another restaurant. My modeling career grew even better. The most popular bands fought to have me as their ambassador. I was loved so much that it felt unreal most of the time. At age 22, I was among the richest and most popular models. My restaurants were also well known, as well as the cooking academy I'd recently established. I was living my dreams, and I was happy. I never thought about my family. They'd abandoned me, and I'd done the same. I found a family in the agency that picked me up. I refused to leave them. Instead, I helped the agency grow bigger to fit the level of my career. My life got even better as time passed. By the time I was 25, I had everything I wanted. I also had a fiancé who I'd met during one of my travels. He was a high-class businessman and loved me dearly. I'd also opened 2 more restaurants and 1 cooking academy, as the first one couldn't accommodate people who wanted to learn from me anymore. One day, during my weekly checkups on all of my business, a beautiful lady walked into my restaurant. She looked so familiar. I watched as she walked over to my manager and engaged him in a discussion. After she left, I went to inquire from him what she wanted, and he told me she was searching for a job. When I heard her name, I was shocked. It was my sister. I decided to dig into their lives. It was then I discovered that my dad's parents' firm got locked by the government after they got caught in fraudulent activities. As for my mom's parents, they were kicked out of the bar because they were involved in the dirty business with my dad's parents. My dad, mom, and sister now lived in a very small apartment and could barely even pay for it. My sister was working multiple jobs to help them survive as my dad was still struggling to find a job while my mom had become crippled. I felt like they hadn't been punished enough. I wanted to get back at them for what they did. So, I bought the house they were living in. Once I became the owner, I increased the price of their rent. Afterward, I went over to 2 out of the 3 places my sister worked and paid them to fire her, which they did without hesitation. I visited them 2 days later and met a sad family. It gladdened my heart to see them suffer. They were happy to see that I visited them, but my words were unexpected. I bragged about how I'd bought their apartment building and how I'd made my sister lose her jobs. My dad and sister both went on their knees and began begging me.
Forgive us, please. It wasn't intentional. Please.
We're going through hell already. Please don't make it worse. Forgive us. Please.
I couldn't believe they were begging me. I decided to let them off the hook. Well, if you think the rent is too high, then leave. I won't bother you afterward. You can get new jobs and stop crying around like fools. Was I truly going to let them be? Of course, but they had nowhere to go. They wouldn't be able to move out or afford the rent. My plan? Pretty simple. I'm going to kick them out once they stop paying rent. That will be my final act of revenge. I know it won't take too long, so I'm patiently waiting. A few months later, their savings ran out, and they didn't pay rent. So I cut them off the grid, and now they live in darkness with no electricity. Next month, if they miss their payment, I'll be kicking them out. Thanks for watching. Make sure to subscribe and leave a comment down below saying, "I subscribed," and we'll try our best to reply to your comment.
What? Is that a child or monster? Why does he look so ugly?
I was hurt hearing him say that to my child. My husband was also hurt, but his mother and sister signaled us to be calm.
Of Down syndrome. But you have no right to say that about my son, Dad. You're being insensitive. But the child is ugly. He looks so hideous. You gave birth to a monster. Why didn't you let him die? He's going to be a liability. A monstrous liability.
I'd had enough of his insensitivity. I stood up and stormed out of the living room with my son. Hi there. My name's Sandra. 3 years ago, my husband and I got married. My husband, Jace, is a good man. I met him when I was working as a receptionist at a hotel. He used to visit there with his business associates. Being the friendly people that we are, it didn't take long before we became friends. On my free days, we would visit restaurants together. We both loved to find and explore new places. I was comfortable and happy with our friendship. A couple of months later, we started going out. We developed feelings for each other after being so close. Jace never failed to make me happy during our dating period. He helped me get a better job with a better pay. Everything was going smoothly. Surprisingly, barely 3 months after we began dating, Jace proposed marriage to me. I couldn't believe it. I cried so much out of happiness. After our engagement, he took me to see his family. According to him, his dad had abandoned them when he was only a child, so he barely knew him. Of course, I didn't mind. When we reached his family's house, I was received lovingly. He had one sibling who I absolutely adore. She and his mother made me feel so loved and accepted. I couldn't be happier with how things were going. We soon got married. Our marriage was a low-key one since we both wanted it that way. I was an orphan, so I didn't have many people in attendance, aside from my friends at work and a few extended families. Nevertheless, I enjoyed my wedding. After the wedding ceremony, Jace and I began our married life in the mansion he bought. Jace had a great job, so money was never a problem for us. I got a call one day, about 4 months after our wedding. It was an unsaved number, so I was skeptical about picking it up. However, I was forced to, when the number continuously kept calling me.
Hello, am I speaking to Sandra?
Yes. Who are you? I was shocked when the caller revealed himself as Jace's father. Even more, he was crying. He asked to meet me up at a restaurant close to our house and said he had a lot of things to tell me and also needed my help. I didn't know whether to believe the stranger. I would have spoken to Jace about it, but the man had begged me not to. The next day, after leaving my workplace, I headed to the restaurant to meet the man. Once I saw him, I immediately knew he was truly Jace's father. They looked so much alike. I greeted him and sat down. We began talking, and he explained that he was sorry about leaving his family.
I regret my decision, child. I wish I could turn back the hands of time. My wife refuses to see me, and I know the kids hate me too. Please help me.
I didn't know what to do. I couldn't tell if it would be a good idea to help him. However, when the man began crying, I couldn't bring myself to refuse. I agreed to help him. The plan was to find a way to gather my husband and his family at their family house, then bring his father to them. I knew Jace would be mad at me for keeping him in the dark, but the man was my father-in-law. Also, I thought it was good since he'd accepted his mistake and was willing to correct it. 2 weeks later, I was finally able to gather us all at Jace's family house. After dinner, I announced that I'd brought someone with me. That was after Jace's father texted to inform me that he was outside the house. I immediately replied and asked him to come in and show himself to the curious people. Once he entered, the whole place fell into silence. Jace's mother, a few seconds later, yelled at him to get out of her house, but the man quickly went on his knees. I did the same and begged for him.
How dare you go to my wife? After all you did, I can't believe you had the boldness to show yourself to us.
His father continued begging and crying. I explained everything the man told me, and it seemed to calm down. Once everyone was calm, Jace's mother asked her husband to leave, as she had to think. The man didn't argue. He stood up and left. Jace's mother broke in a loud sob as her kids went to console her. I also did the same. Afterward, we had a talk. I was able to convince her to forgive her husband as the man seemed truly sorry. I pleaded with my husband and his sister too. Eventually, they agreed to meet him again. I was so happy to have made their family complete again. The next time he saw them, he apologized over and over again. The family hugged each other happily. They decided to start afresh and let the past be buried. I did ask him how he got to know me, and I discovered that he'd been watching the family for long, but was too afraid to approach them. Seeing the love they had for me encouraged him to approach me. 3 months after the reunion, I got pregnant with our first child. Jace was elated. He couldn't stop thanking me and smiling. Family and friends also congratulated us after we shared the news with them. We were all happy. I had to stop my job because my husband didn't want his pregnant wife going through even the slightest stress. I wasn't alone. Whenever Jace was away, his sister would spend time with me. And when his sister wasn't available, his mother was there. We were all happy. Well, that happiness didn't last long. My baby was born with Down syndrome. Strangely, the doctors hadn't noticed at birth and even after birth. When I started to sense his weird behaviors and features around the time he was 4 months old, I took him to the doctor and he was diagnosed. It didn't make me love my son any less, nor did his father. We loved our son and were ready to give him whatever care he needed. It would have been good if my father-in-law was the same. He didn't see or know about my son's condition until the family visited us when my son was 6 months old.
What? Is that a child or monster? Why does he look so ugly?
I was hurt hearing him say that to my child. My husband was also hurt, but his mother and sister signaled us to be calm.
You shouldn't say that about a child. He probably has Down syndrome, according to what I see. You shouldn't speak that way, no matter what.
Down syndrome. But you have no right to say that about my son, Dad. You're being insensitive. But the child is ugly. He looks so hideous. You gave birth to a monster. Why didn't you let him die? He's going to be a liability. A monstrous liability.
I'd had enough of his insensitivity. I stood up and stormed out of the living room with my son. I did hear their loud voices from my room, and I knew they were arguing. Before they left, my mother-in-law and her daughter came into my room and apologized for my father-in-law's behavior. It was so sad that a day I'd planned to be filled with happiness turned out worst. We continued taking care of our son. I refused to allow my father-in-law anywhere close to him. I met up with my mother-in-law and her daughter a few times, but never him. The women loved my son so much, regardless of his issue, and that was all that mattered. On my son's first birthday, we threw a party. It wasn't so big, but big enough to accommodate our families and friends. When the day finally came, my father-in-law ruined it. I was skeptical about inviting him, but I didn't want to be disrespectful by inviting his wife and daughter and not him. Things were going smoothly at the party until my father-in-law requested to give a speech. I smiled, thinking he was going to give an apology speech publicly, but I was wrong. My father-in-law took the mic and began to mock my child. He called him a monster, a sick child, among other vile titles. I burst into tears on my seat. Worst of all, he was laughing while doing that.
If he had Down syndrome and was good-looking, he could have been manageable. But he's as ugly as his mother. I'm sure she agreed to marry my son because she couldn't afford to marry a person as ugly as her.
I was shocked. I had zero idea what suddenly got into him. I couldn't place my hands on a reason he would be doing that to my son and I. Everyone was probably as shocked as me because they remained rooted to their seats with straight faces. Once he was done, he got off the stage with a proud smile and went to his seat. I was about to stand up and leave with my son when my sister-in-law stood up and began walking to the stage. I wondered what she was going to say.
Firstly, you're nothing but an ungrateful, insensitive, bloody fool. You abandoned us for over 15 years. We've hated you all our lives. If it weren't for Sandra, you wouldn't have been with us. Who the hell do you think you are to talk about her son like that? My first nephew?
My tears flowed more as my sister-in-law poured insults on him. Once she was done, a friend of Jace got on the stage.
You're a complete disgrace to all fathers out there. You don't deserve to be called a father.
More people came up on stage and gave him a piece of their minds. I could see the look of guilt in his eyes, seeing that no one accepted him. He tried to approach me with pleading eyes, but my husband stopped him.
I will never let you near them. I should have never allowed you back into our lives.
You've always been an idiot. She made us forgive, and I tried to believe you've changed, but you're still just the stupid man I knew.
I consider myself fatherless from now on. You're evil.
We even accommodate your broke self. Now go back to the house, pack your things, and get out of our lives. If you ever try to come back, I'll report you to the police.
Please, please forgive me. I'll stop it. I'll change, please.
He begged desperately, but his family weren't hearing any of it. Some of our friends grabbed him and threw him out of the party. When we got home and met him there, Jace beat him up so badly that the man escaped by running away without his luggage. It was quite a funny scene. I thanked the family for standing up for my son and I.
You've become my child, and that's my grandson. I won't allow anyone make you both uncomfortable.
You've been good to us. And Down syndrome doesn't make my nephew a monster. We all love him, and we'll protect him.
I don't regret beating him up. He deserves it for messing with my wife and son.
I felt happy and grateful. And as for my father-in-law, he tried to come back for his things, but his daughter gave him another round of beating. That was enough to send him out of our lives forever. Since then, we haven't heard from him. We heard he later got married to a wife who constantly beats him, and unfortunately for them, they had a child with Down syndrome, and Jace's father is depressed. Thanks for watching. Make sure to subscribe and leave a comment down below saying I subscribed, and we will try our best to reply to your comment. When suddenly I heard a window shatter and rushed into the living room to find George destroying furniture, having just broken into the home.
Over my dead body will you inherit my father's things.
He then lunged at me. I instantly pulled my gun and shot him twice, once in the leg and once in the back. Once he was on the ground in pain, I called up the police and had them come and drag him away. Hi, my name is Emily and I have quite the story to tell you. Let me start off by saying that if you had told me that my life would be filled with so much chaos, I would not have believed you. After all, I always tried to avoid drama when I was younger, but sadly that wasn't meant to be. So my story starts off when I was in my mid-20s. I had graduated from college and had been working for a security company for a while. I was making good money, but I had never been very lucky when it came to love. Sure, I had dated some men when I was in high school and in college, but I had never found someone that I would actually want to spend the rest of my life with. That is, until I met George. George was such a wonderful man. He was kind and patient and very, very handsome. When we first met, we instantly fell in love. Not long after we started dating, we got engaged. Many of my friends were worried that we were moving too fast, but I wasn't listening to them. I was blinded by my love for George.
Emily, we really care about you, but there is something odd with George.
What are you talking about? Where is all this coming from?
We both just get a really bad feeling about him. There isn't anything in particular, but we just want to warn you to be careful.
Their words didn't have any impact, but I would later realize that they were right to warn me. Not long after we were married, things began to change though. George started to work longer shifts and would go out many nights partying. Before this, he barely ever went out. I tried to have a conversation with him to find out what changed, but he was very dodgy. Hey George, what's gotten into you recently? You are barely home?
Oh, for crying out loud. Yes, everything is okay. I just enjoy living my life. I don't understand what the problem is.
Well, we just got married, and I barely see you. I figured that we could start trying to have children.
Children? I'm not ready for children just yet. Maybe in a year. Now stop bothering me. I'm getting ready to go out with my friends.
I was incredibly annoyed, but I didn't really know what to do. I was still in love with George, but I was also incredibly confused with just how much he had changed so quickly. It really did appear that my friends had seen something in him that I hadn't seen, or that I had ignored. But then, one day, George came home and had his father with him. His mother had passed away before I had known him, and his father had been in declining health for many years.
Emily, I need you to take care of my father.
Take care of him? What do you mean?
Don't question me. Just do as you're told.
George suddenly had a look in his eyes that made me feel very afraid. For the first time in my life, I felt that I was in mortal danger. I thought for sure that if I spoke out again, that George was certainly going to hit me. Looking at his father, I took his arm and led him to our spare bedroom and made sure he was comfortable. Shortly after that, George left and went out to party for the night. Left alone with his father, I noticed that he was in very poor shape. I wasn't sure what was making him so ill, but it was clear that he wasn't going to get better. I went and made dinner for my father-in-law and myself and then helped him to eat. After he was done, he opened up to me.
I'm sorry, Emily. I know that this isn't how you wanted to live your life.
What do you mean?
I know how poorly my son has been treating you, and I'm sure it is no surprise that he treats me just as poorly.
Well, George hasn't always been this way, though. I don't know what happened, but he recently changed and not for the better.
No, I'm sorry, but he has always been this way. He has just hidden it very well.
He went on to explain how George had been terrible to him and his wife when she had been alive. Apparently, George was even known to get physically violent and had beaten both his mother and father several times over the years. He then went on to let me know that he had cancer and was dying and that he wouldn't live for much longer. This made me incredibly saddened, both because it meant that he would pass away soon, but also that George was most definitely not the man that I had thought he was. This terrified me. George's father was incredibly bitter. As it turned out, once George found out that his father was dying, he dragged the man back to his home so that he could gut and sell all of his parents' belongings and renovate their house so that once his father passed away, that they could easily sell it and make a lot of money. Well, my father-in-law despised him for that, as well as the way that he was treating me.
I'm sorry to say that my son has also been cheating on you. I don't know with who, but I have heard rumors of him spending a lot of time with several different women.
That can't be true.
I'm very sorry, but it is. Listen, I need you to take a letter to my lawyer on my behalf. I'm too weak to deliver it myself, and the documents in it can't be emailed or read over the phone. Please do this for me.
Even though it really felt like he was telling the truth, I needed to know for sure with my own eyes that what he was saying was true. So I agreed to take the letter, but only after I found out for sure if George was cheating on me. If he was, then I would divorce him instantly, as that would be the final straw. The next day, I took care of his father, but when he left to go out for the night, I followed him, and sure enough, I saw him meet with a woman, and the two kissed, and then went into her home. I pretty much knew what was going on in there, and filled with anger, I marched over to my father-in-law's lawyer and gave him the letter. The man thanked me profusely and apologized for the clandestine nature of my delivery of the letter.
Trust me, all of this will end up being worth it. Just have faith.
I wasn't sure exactly what he was talking about, but I also didn't care at the time. Instead, I marched home and made plans to file for divorce. The problem was that if I left George right away, then there would be no one to take care of his father. I couldn't do that to the man, and so I contacted a lawyer and told her my situation and that I needed her to prepare the divorce paperwork, but to hold off on filing it until George's father passed away. For weeks, I endured George's verbal abuse and the idea that he would leave every night to spend hours in another woman's bed. It made me so incredibly angry, but I knew that I wouldn't have to wait too long. Finally, the day came when my father-in-law passed away. It was very bittersweet. I had grown to care about the old man, and even began to love him like a second father. But I also knew that not only would his suffering end, but so would mine. After he passed, I contacted my lawyer, who sent over the divorce paperwork, which I left on the kitchen table, before grabbing everything of value from the house before leaving. Hours later, George called me up and threatened to find me and drag me back home.
You evil bitch. How dare you threaten me with divorce? Do you really think that I would just let you go that easily?
You awful monster. Why would you want me to stay? You've been sleeping with dozens of other women. Why would I want to be your wife after you threw our marriage vows away so easily? I'm just lucky that you never lay a hand on me.
Well, now I wish I had. Maybe a black eye and a fat lip would have made you realize your place. But you know what? You're right. Now that the old man is dead, I'll inherit his money and home, and I'll be richer than you could possibly imagine. You've made a huge mistake. Good luck being poor. Ha!
I really didn't care what he was saying. So long as he didn't challenge the divorce, I would be in the clear. Days later, though, my father-in-law's lawyer contacted me and asked to see me. When I went to his office, he announced that he had some exciting news.
Hi there, Emily. I wish we could meet again under better circumstances, but I want you to know that you made your father-in-law feel very comfortable and loved in his final days. So much so that he wanted to reward you, but on the condition that you divorce his no-good son.
Well, I have already done that.
Yes, indeed you have. Well, you will be happy to know that your father-in-law left you his house, as well as the house that you lived in with George, along with your father-in-law's bank accounts.
As it turned out, my father-in-law owned the house that we lived in. George had always been terrible with money, and his father had been forced years before to buy the house so that George wouldn't lose it. Now that he was gone, he made sure to leave all of his wealth and assets to me, while leaving a substantial amount of debt to the executor of the will, which was George. After he told me that I had essentially become wealthy overnight, I began to laugh and then thank the lawyer. However, I knew that once George found out that he wasn't going to inherit anything of value and instead was going to be saddled with hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of debt, that he would no doubt come looking for me to get even, and I wasn't going to give him the satisfaction of hurting me or stealing what was rightfully now mine. I filed a restraining order against him and then went and bought myself a gun. A week later, I was looking at my father-in-law's old house and was taking stock of what I needed fixed before moving in, when suddenly I heard a window shatter and rushed into the living room to find George destroying furniture, having just broken into the home.
Over my dead body will you inherit my father's things.
He then lunged at me. I instantly pulled my gun and shot him twice, once in the leg and once in the back. Once he was on the ground in pain, I called up the police and had them come and drag him away. They had a million questions, of course, and it took answering them all 3 times before they believed that I was the new owner. All of them found it incredibly funny and were pleased. They dragged him to a hospital, but once they released him, they then took him to prison. He ended up being sentenced for 10 years since they found all kinds of tools, which George meant to use to kidnap me. I'm not sure what his overall plan was, but I do know for one thing that George will be forced to use ramps going forward since one of the bullets that I shot him with lodged itself into the base of his lower back at his spinal column and did so much damage that he was told that he would never walk again. I found it rather poetic that after he had mistreated both his parents and myself, that I was able to scoop up the very wealth that he had planned to keep away from me. I wrote him a letter saying that should he still want to tell me how unfairly he had been treated, then he was welcome to pay me a visit once he was finally released. However, he should know that if I ever see him again, that I plan to make sure that the next house that he breaks into, he better have a wheelchair ready. I made sure to include a picture of myself holding my gun. I wanted him to know that if he tried anything, that next time I wouldn't shoot at him randomly, but instead that I would aim for his heart. Since then, I have enjoyed lots of quiet and peace. And who knows? Maybe I'll still be able to find my Prince Charming one day. Thanks for watching. Make sure to subscribe and leave a comment down below, saying I subscribed, and we will try our best to reply to your comment.
I told y'all, but you didn't believe me. Ivy has always been like this. She lost her virginity 2 years ago. She sleeps with different guys, and Chris just happens to be the one she intentionally slept with because we were dating.
She was lying so much that I was irritated. Worst of all, they believed her. I tried to tell them I was raped, but they refused to listen and called me a liar. I was thrown into a state of shock when my parents renounced me as their child. Growing among cousins and other extended relations is cool, but it also has its disadvantages. Aunties can be quite dangerous when they get envious of you or your child, so beware of them. After my ordeal, I always reminded myself of that. Oh, I forgot to introduce myself. Hi. I'm Ivy, age 29 and married with 2 kids. My grandparents had a very huge house where they lived. Every Friday, everyone in the family was to be at the family house. We usually stayed until the next day. It was called bonding. My grandparents were very serious about bonding. They had 4 children, and all were married with kids. My cousins were all older than me, as my parents had a little trouble with childbirth before they had me. Being the youngest of all the grandchildren, my grandparents adored me. I was like their cherished puppy. Once during dinner, my second eldest cousin, who was sitting beside me, took my glass, which was nearly empty, and filled it up with juice before filling his. My aunt's daughter, Jenny, suddenly stretched hers too.
Fill up mine too, Carl.
Why should I? You have a jug beside you.
Didn't Ivy also have one beside her?
Yes, didn't she? Why can't you fill up Jenny's cup?
I was beginning to get tensed. Why were they doing that? If they continued, the dinner could get ruined. I was about to speak, but my mom beat me to it.
Okay, what's your deal with my daughter? I honestly don't understand what both your problems are. Are you crazy? How dare you? My daughter and I are now problematic. Wow, coming from you, that's so rich.
My mom was about to retaliate, but I stepped in. That's enough. We're being disrespectful to Grandma and Grandpa. Let's just eat, please. I'm sorry to everyone for being the issue. Let's eat, please.
You're not the issue, child. Do not say that. I'm glad. At least you're mature.
That passed. I finished high school and got into college. My grandparents advised my parents to let me apply at the same college my other cousins were. It was also where I'd wanted to apply, so I did, and passed. But the issue was, Jenny had always been jealous of me and was in the same school. Jenny was in her 3rd year when I got in. At college, She often acted like we never knew each other. She would walk past me and intentionally brush against my shoulder. However, I never spoke anything about it. I avoided her as much as I could. Since I was the shy type, I didn't know how to make friends. I had 3 more cousins there, so I mostly spent time with them at the cafeteria. One day, Jenny approached me. I was at the library and was surprised to see her in front of me.
I heard it. Did you think I wouldn't? Gosh, I can't believe you'd stoop so low.
I was confused. What was she on about? She had a deadly gaze on as she stared directly into my eyes. I asked what she was talking about, and she suddenly grabbed me by my hair.
You must think I'm dumb, right? I heard it all. You went behind my back to seduce Chris, didn't you?
I didn't even know who my husband was at the time. I'd heard people talking about him, but I hadn't seen him. Again, I asked her to be clear. Then she finally revealed the reason for her anger. Apparently, news was going round that Chris liked me, but the issue was Jenny had a crush on Chris. It was surprising to me, as we'd never even met each other. I tried to explain that to Jenny, but she wasn't having it. She pulled my hair tighter and warned me to stay away, or she wouldn't waste any time in making the school unbearable for me. When she left, I couldn't understand anything. Suddenly, Chris approached me. He introduced himself and told me he was in year 3. He asked if I was Ivy, and I replied that I was. Then he told me about what the rumors were saying, and how bothered he was about it. I was captivated by his handsomeness and the smart way he spoke. However, the matter at hand was more serious. Right when we were speaking and wondering how they even thought of pairing me of all people with him, Jenny rushed into the library, alongside some other girls.
So, the rumors are true? I can't believe you.
Before I could try to explain, she pounced on me. Jenny was quite big, so it was impossible for Chris to get her off me, especially with the way her friends were holding him back. By the time him and a few others around managed to separate us, I had a broken nose, lips, cuts around my eyes, on my chins and my right ear bleeding after she roughly pulled my earrings. I was immediately rushed to the school's clinic where the wounds were instantly disinfected. Our parents were summoned and my mom flared up.
What did Ivy do? Why do you hate her so much, huh?
Jenny's mother wasn't having it either. They nearly fought in the school's president's office, but were stopped. Her friends all pretended to not know about what caused the fight and only said we suddenly started fighting. Chris, however, told them that Jenny attacked first. When the CCTV was checked, they saw that it was true. While I got suspended for 3 days, Jenny got 3 weeks. It wasn't an easy period for the whole family, as everyone blamed Jenny after I told them it was about Chris. However, Jenny lied to them and said I was sleeping with Chris. Of course, no one believed her. They knew I wasn't such a person, and that clearly offended she and her mother. I returned to school after a month, and that was probably my worst mistake. 2 days after I returned, I was raped in an abandoned class. I couldn't bring myself to tell anyone about it, as I felt ashamed. I withdrew and took care of myself alone. Misfortune hit when I realized I was pregnant. I tried to hide it, but my mother's eyes couldn't be deceived for long. Once it was out that I was pregnant, the whole family, except my aunt and Jenny, were disappointed.
I told y'all, but you didn't believe me. Ivy has always been like this. She lost her virginity 2 years ago. She sleeps with different guys, and Chris just happens to be the one she intentionally slept with because we were dating.
She was lying so much that I was irritated. Worst of all, they believed her. I tried to tell them I was raped, but they refused to listen and called me a liar. I was thrown into a state of shock when my parents renounced me as their child. I begged with every strength I had in me, but they refused to listen.
You cease to be our daughter. You have embarrassed us. Get out.
My grandparents couldn't do anything. They wanted to help, but they were also disappointed and agreed with my parents. I was thrown out of their lives. With a child in me and no family to turn to, I was left stranded on the road. I walked about, not knowing where to go or what to do. That same night, Chris happened to come across me on the road, crying. He asked what happened, and I explained the whole thing to him.
No way. You don't deserve that. We have to report to the police. I'm going to go with you to your parents and let them know that nothing's going on between you and I, or even I and Jenny, or whatever her name is.
I refused. They'd thrown me out, There was nothing I could do about it. I told him I was going to get through it alone, but he refused. He blamed himself for it and invited me to his house. I got to know that he was an orphan and was working while schooling. I couldn't deny that he was doing quite well for himself. He let me stay under his roof and also fed me. Tragedy struck again when I had a miscarriage. I almost died, but Chris was there for me. He took me to the hospital and ensured I got the best treatment. I thought about my family often. I was disappointed at how easily they gave up on me. Least they could do was ask me to invite Chris over and question him, not just believe Jenny. I couldn't get over the pain and heartache their actions brought me. I managed to get a job, as I couldn't return to college or let Chris take care of me forever. He was good from the beginning. When he saw that my job as a waitress wasn't paying enough, he helped me secure a better job. We got closer with time, and of course, feelings began to develop. After 6 months of staying with him, I got myself an apartment. I was only 20 then. I worked even harder. Since I needed to finish my college education, I applied for scholarships so I could start afresh. Luckily, one clicked and I was in school again. Chris and I got into a relationship. My parents never called. They'd indeed abandoned me. I moved on and worked even harder. By the time I was in my second year in college and nearly my second year in a relationship with Chris, there was another rape case in the college. Chris told me the girl was raped after a fight with Jenny over a male student. I connected the dots, and it was similar to my case. I asked Chris if I could bring mine up again, and he promised to back me up, and it began. I returned to school and told them everything that had happened to me since the fight with Jenny. The news spread quickly. I discovered that the new victim was assaulted in the same place as me. So I requested that the CCTV footage of both days be checked. Action was put in place immediately. When they checked, it was discovered that the same guy was the culprit of both incidents. He was caught by the police and he confessed and was sent to prison. My parents heard about it and called, requesting to see me. I took Chris with me. While at my parents' house, he told them he'd never had anything going on with either Jenny or me, and he wasn't responsible for my pregnancy. My family were shocked. Jenny and her mother bowed their heads in shame. My parents and other family members apologized to me and urged me to return home, but I refused. I'd forgiven them, but I wasn't going to go back there. Just as they were still begging me, the doorbell rang. My dad and 3 police officers walked in. They revealed that they'd found out from the culprit that Jenny had paid him to commit the crimes. She was arrested on the spot. Her mother sobbed loudly and heavily as she followed them, begging the cops to not take her child. Well, I left my parents' house after assuring them that they had my forgiveness. I continued my life with Chris, working harder on our relationship, work, and school. I communicated with my parents quite regularly, but our relationship had been tainted forever, with the lack of trust they displayed at the time when I desperately needed them. After graduation, Chris and I got a house. We also got better jobs and were living well. He proposed to me, and I agreed. We were blossoming in love. Jenny's mother couldn't attend our wedding, as she was busy visiting her daughter in jail, where she was serving a 35-year jail term. We even heard from Jenny's mom that Jenny was raped by 2 guards. They were never caught or charged, and because of that, Jenny is traumatized. While in prison, she sometimes acts like she's mad. Jenny's mom is depressed and lives alone with 4 cats. As for me, 2 years after our wedding, we had our first child, a boy. When he clocked 2, his sister was born. I allowed my family to visit us at home, but I never let my kids go over to theirs. I also didn't allow a close relationship with their cousins, and Chris supported. Neither of us wanted a repetition of what happened to me, even though we knew they might not be as bad as Jenny. We just had to be careful. Thanks for watching. Make sure to subscribe and leave a comment down below saying I subscribed, and we will try our best to reply to your comment.